Are you trying to activate your performative shoujo energy? Looking for peak feminine fiction? Need tips and tricks on misgendering anime? Well,
you've come to the wrong place.
Hello my wonderful besties, I hope you're all well, and today we'll be discussing the performative shoujo movement. The rise of shonen series being classified as shoujo has spiraled into conversations about what shoujo is, isn't, what, how, and the perception of these series. Shonen v shoujo discourse has plagued the online lexicon for the past several years. For example, opinions touting that shoujo are outdated romance tropes and doesn't profit as much as their male counterparts, including merchandise, games, toys, anime, and manga. While these mentalities have been debunked and examined based on other factors, how have these messages permeated our cultural fabric and fed into shonen series being regarded as shoujo? Obviously, at the most basic level, it's the emotional aspect that makes these claims seem so credible. It's similar to gender-neutral or universal marketing. Essentially, it aims to prove why demographical labels are meaningless. People should be able to enjoy a series without hyper-fixating the target audience. However, many of the comments seem to reinforce sexism and contrast with the anime demographic war era that we're in right now, but series like Romantic Killer have become central conflict generators for these discussions, especially on TikTok. So today, I want to explore the shonen urge to be shoujo. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to thank Ella Pastoral for collabing with me on this video. Ella's channel where she explores topics of pop culture and media and its intersections with race and femininity. Her joyous energy is so infectious, and she will be specifically talking about the Romantic Killer anime and how it handled its tough subject matter near the end of the show. The link to Ella's video and channel will be in my description, so make sure to give it a watch and support her channel. Say it with me, that is youtube.com/ellapastoral to watch her video on the Romantic Killer anime. Alright, now back to the shonen urge to be shoujo. Firstly, I think it's important to define shoujo. According to Wikipedia, it is a category of Japanese comics or animation targeting an audience of adolescent females and young adult women. Although we commonly associate shoujo with slice of life or romance, it's important to note that shoujo is a demographic, not a genre, meaning that there are action, fantasy, mecha, isekai, supernatural, and psychological thriller series in the shoujo demographic. This is not to be confused with shonen, which targets teen boys and young adult men that is not just limited to the action genre. Because we have pigeonholed shoujo as romance for so long, it's easy to conflate the demographic with this genre. Many shoujosei TikTok creators have been vocal about the misgendering of shoujo and its direct effects on how the anime community views the demographic.
It's the genre. Already don't trust this person because it's a demographic.
Watch the rest of Alexis's video, as well as the other videos that she's put out today replying to the variety of comments. It's very important and very much illustrated in this Instagram story I saw this week, which is a great time to bring it up. So this account made a poll that said, choose your favorite genre. Shonen, slice of life, shoujo, and mecha. Slice of life and mecha are genres. Shonen and shoujo are demographics, meaning that they're aimed at certain age groups. But that's it. Shonen and shoujo can have multiple genres. There are shonen romances, just like there are shoujo action series and dramas. So if we can have more people understand that shonen can't be your favorite genre and shoujo is so much more than just romance, the community is going to be a much better place.
This has led to discussions of the representation in the shoujo community, namely when it comes to merchandise for popular series such as Sailor Moon, Precure, Fruits Basket, and Kami-sama Kiss. Shoujosei fans explained the conventions they attended, such as Yamacon. The booths mainly sold shonen-related products for series such as Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer. While shonen action series are synonymous with receiving video games, they also receive merch consisting of figurines, hoodies, and t-shirts, whether official or fan-made. A contributing factor to this is popular shonen and seinen seasonal anime grossing a significant amount of money and, in some cases, overperforming. As a result, in a shocking turn of events, Crunchyroll themselves has admitted Western female anime fans in the shoujo, josei, and parts of the BL communities are underserved with content. Funimation's chief customer officer, Asa Surihira, said while battle shonen and isekai are topping the charts, female-targeted media has strong growth potential due to an unmet demand, confirming what many shoujo fans have been mentioning for years, and are putting a lot of debates into perspective.
And somebody asked another question, why are shoujo manga not made into anime as often, even if the readership is just as big? And again, it's because of sexism, and it's because of assumptions by the animation industry, but also like their assumption is that girls will watch anime based on shonen and seinen manga, but boys will not watch shoujo anime. And whether that's true or not is debatable. Sometimes it's actually not true. It's just the prejudice of the producers. But sometimes the demographics of the viewership do bear that out. So that really is too bad. It really is a shame there's not as much shoujo anime as there is shoujo manga.
Some fan-favorite shonen series were inspired by shoujo manga, proving that even if a series is categorically shonen, the framing of certain tropes and character dynamics can resemble that of a shoujo series. Introspective dialogue, empathy-driven storytelling, and emotional and physical intimacy are all staple shoujo-isms. So this reminded me of a study I learned about from Japanology professor Jacqueline Bernth about shoujo storytelling abilities and what sets a demographic apart. Bernth and her team explored this phenomenon in their book Shoujo Across Media, where they dissect the evolution of shoujo manga, its relationship with female readers, and intersections with other demographics. Dr. Kazumi Nagake and Raymond Langley argued that shoujo deviates from the I or me of modern individualism in favor of a fluid, multidimensional identity. There's an insistence on forming connections with individual characters rather solely on plot progression. By analyzing two seinen manga, Chobits and Kabukamon, scholars illustrate how shoujo integrates itself in the framing of the characters, the subject of their gaze, and impact on the readers. In Chobits, the main female android Chi is dressed or wrapped with her long hair, which conceals her body from the readers and the male protagonist, Hideki. Her soft pink frilly dresses reveal her soul to be feminine in the narrative. One of Chobits' main themes is exploring love that's not motivated by sexual desire, and critiquing Hideki's actions in objectifying Chi with an uneven power dynamic. What could have been simply a voyeuristic AI series that creates a male fantasy of digitally programmed women explored gender autonomy in a raw and compelling way. In Kabukamon, Shinkoro, our main lead, is an aspiring Taichiaku who gets involved in a political battle with two opposing factions. The cast is all male with romances performed on stage, which adds a homoerotic element heavily reminiscent of BL. While Kyo Tanaka is typically associated with action-driven series like Shamu, Kabukamon employs more humanistic elements, such as Shinkoru coming to terms with his gender identity. Gender bending is another byproduct of his masculine gender performance, seamlessly segueing into shoujo's main tipping point. Thomas Lamore's concept on the soulful body is what identifies shoujo elements in other demographics, and uses aspects of Judith Butler's theory on gender performativity to describe this representation. The soulful body refers to anime-manga characters' costumes that prompt recognition outside of narrative purpose. The attire worn and props used reveal the social setting and personality of a character. Shoujo manga typically employs a wide variety of fashion styles, such as mangaka groups like Clamp that employed the Lolita fashion style, which is partly inspired by the Victorian and Edwardian style. However, there are some blind spots with Chobits and Kabukamon that aren't shoujo from a visual perspective. Employing geometric paneling, not transgressing through the page, and not using backgrounds or scenery as metaphors for characters' emotions all present a masculine approach in the visual language, hence creating a major separation between shonen, seinen, and shoujo. Subsequently, Lamore describes an aspect of Leganianism called objectivité, which is a part of the object that only implies wholeness. Women are fragmented into objectivité and reconstructed as a whole by focusing on these fragments, which then are superimposed upon a specific woman, making her an object. The gaze as object and subject, i.e. woman and phallic man, form the driving dichotomy of patriarchal power. The phallic man is signified by the woman's lack. Consequently, the subject is signified by the object being looked at by it, and allegedly being manipulated by the object at the same time. I find this study enlightening because I've seen shoujo mangas incorporate these theories and has impacted why people find these series so beloved. For example, the romantic comedy series Lovesick Ellie does depict perversion and exploring sexuality, but it doesn't objectify one character's body in favor of another. Ellie fantasizes about a fictional boy until she meets Omi, who challenges this notion. Panels lingering on the before and aftermath of a kiss entices the reader to sympathize with the emotions they are feeling. I think what female-targeted anime manga all have in common is the way gender, sexuality, and autonomy are pushed to the forefront, which is what draws in their readership. So, long tangent on studies aside, I'm trying not to veer off too far from this video, but I feel like this is where it stems from. The intimacy and empathy-driven storytelling demonstrate how shoujo differs from shonen and seinen. Also, I feel that male-targeted anime manga is becoming more gender-neutral, with series like Spy Family, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Kaguya-sama Love is War having little traditional fan service. However, performative shoujo content leans into a more archaic formula for shoujo, and a lot of it is directed towards slice-of-life series, so why do people say these series are shoujo? It's well known that shoujo has been stereotyped as pure, vapid, wish fulfillment romances that primarily reside in high school due to series like Fruits Basket and Kimi ni Todoke. However, as we can see from the study I just mentioned, these stereotypes did not come from any inherent truth about shoujo, and also didn't come out of nowhere. Stereotypes are used to justify actions. For example, sexist stereotypes didn't cause ignorance about shoujo's popularity, but people used them to justify the disparity between shonen and shoujo. There isn't a definitive start date for when this all occurred, but it's pretty clear that it is a response to some shonen series using tired tropes in their romance stories. Creators who say these statements found an anime that exceeded their expectations, and based on their viewing experience, the series feels like a shoujo. For the uninitiated, performative shoujo content usually presents someone talking about a shonen series they love and classifying it as a shoujo based on certain tropes and storylines. Some of these videos seem harmless and reference the pacing of a series overlapping, or character interactions focused on intimacy, which could encourage people to seek out different narratives in shonen. There's nothing wrong with viewing a series this way and enjoying those aspects of it, but what I find strange are that the series recommended don't have the same appeal that makes a series definitively shoujo. However, there are comments out here that are problematic because it places shoujo in a stereotypical box, unable to escape the clutches of high school romance. A popular video that many of these performative shoujo creators make is saying a shonen series they love is the female gaze.
Death Note, female gaze.
I think some of you are still confused about the male gaze versus the female gaze, so let me break it down for you. This is the female gaze, and so is this.
A shonen series is the female gaze because not every character is drawn to be macho or sexy, or a shonen series has a largely female audience, so that unquestionably means women will gravitate towards it, are the most common reframes. In retrospect, I think these creators know opinions aren't empirical and understand that aspects of these series won't appeal to all shoujo fans, but my biggest thing is, why are you going out of your way to say popular shonen and seinen series are shoujo? Keeping this in mind, one series in particular that have made waves for performative shoujo is Romantic Killer. Romantic Killer is an interesting case of performative shoujo, since the manga was serialized through Shueisha Shonen Jump Plus, yet published in Viz's Shoujo Beat, taking away one of the few slots in the magazine. This practice isn't necessarily new. For example, in 2015, Boys Over Flowers ran 3 of its chapters in Weekly Shonen Jump and debuted digitally in Japan Shueisha Shonen Jump Plus under the name Hana no Chinare. The reason why it's so egregious here is that allegedly, one of the newest volumes of Snow White with the Red Hair was denied an opportunity to be released in favor of promoting Romantic Killer. Even the author has stated that they view Romantic Killer as a shoujo, adding fuel to the fire. Unlike some shonen romances, Romantic Killer does center the female lead narratively. We learn that Anzu is a teenage girl that loves chocolate, her cat, video games, and seemingly living a perfect life. However, once a fairy imp named Riri transports her in a dating sims world, Anzu is forced into scenarios where attractive men are in love with her. Her main love interest, Tsukasa, appears to be a quiet boy who many girls ogle over, but that quiet persona begins to fade when he houses with Anzu, becoming a lot brighter and more charming than what meets the surface. Many of the storylines Anzu encounters center around interpersonal skills, childhood hotties, and slapstick humor. While Romantic Killer doesn't have many glaring flaws and often pokes fun at shoujo manga tropes, it hardly has the heart and soul of shoujo romance. It's evident with the artificial love triangle, it's visible in the comedy reigning over the romance, it's there in the moments before a confession, not letting that action come to a satisfying conclusion. The series' attempt at being a shoujo is simply redundant. We aren't presented with anything new in the romance genre, and segments like Riri's meta humor and Anzu's relationship with their love interests don't match the emotional intensity often associated with shoujo. I would argue a series like Skip Beat with loads of comedy, like Kyoko's exaggerated facial features when she's angry, and Ren's darkly sarcastic remarks, also managed to create deep emotional tension between them. But who is to blame? The fans who say Romantic Killer is a shoujo, or the manga industry licensing a shonen manga published in a shoujo magazine? Anzu is ultimately reduced to a stylized supercut of a shoujo protagonist. Of course, my interpretation is one of many, and primarily anecdotal, but it seems Romantic Killer focuses more on parodying rather than solely on the romance between the leads. There's a fine line balancing this when writing because on one hand it can feel overbearing if a character is defined by their love interest, but it can seem performative and out of touch if those deep emotional scenes in shoujo romance are a minority in the story. It's not that Romantic Killer is not a heartfelt and good romance, it's just that the nature of its romance doesn't match other shoujo series. But two of the biggest issues with this performative shoujo content are that these claims largely center around women playing an active role in a story, and it places too much emphasis on the shonen demographic as wholly gender neutral. So let's tackle female autonomy first. One of the major fervors that erupted surrounding shonen series as shoujo is the employment of active female subjects, also known as the female gaze, the practice of representing women as subjects having agency. Female representation and gender inclusion for shoujo are seen as a threat to shonen. While using Romantic Killer and Horimiya as examples of shoujo may help for exposure, that's as far as its purpose extends. It's not increasing people's engagement with shoujo content as a whole. This concept of female autonomy and capability signifying shoujo has gained traction in even more lighthearted ways. And I'm not trying to deter anyone from enjoying Horimiya or Romantic Killer. They are fine series, and if you happen to find shoujo tropes in the anime, more power to you. As mentioned earlier though, I think this rhetoric classifies shoujose as only based in reality, which is far from true. Series like Sarah's Celestial Legend, Hakuoki, and the 12 Kingdoms all deal with fantastical elements. But this notion is less to do with the nature of feminine media and more to do with the nature of capitalism. Japanese media studies researcher Diane Wei Lewis explored the concept of the patriarchy of the Shiage, which is the idea that under capitalism in the anime industry, wage relations are used to maintain gender hierarchy. In a 2019 interview with Vox regarding the dark side of the anime industry, Lewis talks briefly about a study where female animators who worked from home were especially vulnerable to exploitation and even paid less. which she wrote about in her article, Shiage and Women's Flexible Labor in the Japanese Animation Industry. She notes that, with the nature of women working on animation from home in the 1970s and 80s, the area of reproductive activity, such as housework and domestic work in anime production, becomes devalued, exploited, and feminized. In this article, Lewis shows how housework became exploited in the anime industry, and I'm just gonna quote her directly because she says it perfectly. With anime's growing popularity, as well as factors impacting the labor pool for Japanese workers performing low-level production tasks, animation cell coloring joined the nexus of women's continuing education opportunities. As the market for women's continuing education and training flourished, commercial women's magazines strive to reconcile women's continuing education and employment with the powerful ideology of the professional housewife, Sengyo Shufu, that located women's primary responsibilities in the domestic sphere. One way that magazines and advertisers could reconcile women's continuing education and employment with Sengyo Shufu discourse was to appeal to women as consumers. In one ad, a man admires a woman's penmanship and her wish to keep an orderly account book, for he believes these qualities will make her an ideal wife. However, in the final frame of the cartoon, he is taken aback when she declares that she will use these newfound skills to keep her future husband's spending in check. The division of labor and descaling of low-level production tasks and reliance on women as flexible sources of labor cannot be separated from the medium's aesthetic development. A 1959 article on women animators at Toydoga held the lowest-ranking female workers accountable for growing labor unrest, blaming the troubles on girlish, undisciplined dispositions. At the same time, the studio's large number of female workers inspired the journalist to write, "Most of this animation is made by women. Indeed, it is no exaggeration to say that if you aren't a woman, you can't do this work." Of the 136 animators who worked on Toydoga's Magic Boy, Japan's first CinemaScope feature-length animated film, 120 were women. Male veteran animators, some with 20 years of experience, drew the film's keyframes, which serves as guides for male in-betweeners, who made the interstitial drawings to connect these images. In contrast, young women, many of them art school graduates, did all of the tracing and coloring, a total of 78,654 cells. In 1981, many of these training-cum employment opportunities were exposed as inchiki naishoku, shady sidework scams. Part consumer fraud and part labor exploitation, these scams took advantage of working housewives by charging for training and equipment for work that never arrived or was never paid. The Nihon Keizai Shinbun observed, "These methods have been around for a long time, but in the last few years, there has been an especially remarkable incident of scams that use advertisements in women's magazines or inserts in newspapers, types of ads that seem to take advantage of the psychology of housewives who crave a convenient source of cash." Despite a growing body of scholarship of female anime and manga fans, as well as greater attention to female-oriented drawing styles and genres, much of the writing of anime and prosumption has focused on male otaku who translate their knowledge and passion for anime into amateur creations, new forms of sociality, and even careers. In general, anime fan studies emphasize the creativity, connoisseurship, and skill involved in the creation of so-called derivative works, based on existing intellectual property. Although it may seem that Shiage workers make a very minor contribution to the creative process, Shiage reflects important historical transformations in anime production, both aesthetic and institutional. End quote. I never could put my finger on why this performative shoujo movement always bothered me. In actuality, it basically promotes traditional gender roles to justify excluding feminine media, when it's really unpaid labor and shady behavior as an excuse to exploit and stereotype women. As we can see, the historical notions of women in the anime industry are problematic, but understandably, people who want to get into shoujo see popular series in the mainstream came from romance. romance. Ironically, I think a lot of the issue with this mentality is that it overgeneralizes an entire demographic of anime and manga. There is no denying that shoujo has romance, and comparing those themes in shonen can make the demographic more accessible. But it's equally important to acknowledge that shoujo has so much to offer, especially when so many amazing series are not licensed in English. So, in conclusion, I originally wanted to make this video because I found the concept of framing a shonen series as a shoujo to be extremely bizarre. After all, it's very Googleable. I do understand that not everyone cares about demographics and watches whatever meets their fancy, but I think it's a mistake to brand shoujo as something based on feeling rather than manga serialization. And while these creators are promoting anime and manga, which is fantastic, it doesn't sit well with me that these series need to be misgendered, not to mention the more problematic promotion of framing shoujo as simply pure, vapid, romance, and wish fulfillment stories. Performative shoujo content enables the blurred lines between shonen and shoujo and takes the spotlight away from a niche demographic, which is unacceptable. Shoujo not getting recognition is not simply because of sales, it's due to the capitalist notion that women's reproductive labor in the anime industry should be devalued and exploited. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment on your thoughts, and I'll see y'all in my next video. Until next time, bye!